All right, as we continue, I want to go through and I want to show you a little bit about lighting and why I choose to do certain things, okay? So you have to go back to the painters that were in the Renaissance and the Baroque time period. Prior to that time period, you had painters that painted in like two-dimensional kind of feel, very flat, didn't have much depth. And then there was this Renaissance that happened when painters started to model the light and give a three-dimensional look to the paintings that they were doing. Now, how did they do that? Well, they did that by using cross light. Now, I use that term cross light, or we would say, we could tag that, there's a term called the Rembrandt lighting or Rembrandt triangle. That's on the side of the face. I talk a lot about that in my lighting tutorials, and I love to teach that light. It's one of the most beautiful lighting techniques on the planet, is to get what I call cross light to reveal a Rembrandt triangle. That is lit from one side, having a modeling coming across, and having a shadowed side. Now, when I started teaching, and I would refer to the cross light with light coming across my subject, and I would make and say, this is the Rembrandt triangle, I would get people say, well, hey, wait. I went to a photography school, you know, a big tech school, and they taught us to put the light 45 degrees to our subject, okay? When I was sharing a studio with a buddy, I didn't have any strobe experience. I got a degree in fine arts, the University of Arizona, in photography, but it was in the fine arts. No strobe, nothing. Now, I read a few books at the time. There wasn't a lot on lighting. I read a few books, and you know, so there was a little bit of guidelines. I didn't have a whole lot, but what really inspired me was when I started taking all these art history classes, and I had an art history class, and we studied the Baroque and the Renaissance time period. And so that in my brain, I went, wow, that's gorgeous. And then when I got my first softbox and a strobe, the first thing I did was set it up to create a Rembrandt cross light. I didn't know necessarily that it was supposed to be set up, or at least it was taught that it was set up at 45 degrees to the subject. I was doing a cross light, 90 degrees to the subject. And so how did I end up at 90 degrees to the subject? Well, I kept shooting until it looked like what I thought it should look like and what the painters were doing and painting. So I've had people email me, or when I've done a Facebook or a social media post, they want to correct me. Say, oh, no. Rembrandt is 45 degrees to the subject. Well, okay. And then they refer to Wikipedia says it's supposed to be 40, you know, they have a diagram 45 degrees to the subject. Well, somebody wrote that. Probably an instructor at one of those fancy colleges. However, I've been to Rembrandt's studio. The light source that he had to his subject was not 45 degrees. In fact, if you try to get a window, put in a small, you know, a small room, try to get at 45 degrees to the subject. You're pretty much having your back against the wall, or in some cases, you'd have to be outside the building looking in to get that light. If you could get outside. If there's a brick wall, you can't go through that. But the point is that doesn't make any sense, okay? So I've done all sorts of studies on showing a 45 degree to the subject and 90 degrees to the subject, and looking at it and doing them side by side. Back when I was first teaching, before even digital, I had Polaroids, and I'd have a class, I'd shoot 45, and I'd shoot 90, and I'd show the class, and they go. And I remember a very successful photographer came up to me before internet, before social media, before all that, and he said, I really like your work. How do you set your softbox up? Well, I had no secrets, so I said 90 degrees to the subject. He goes, me too. Don't tell anyone. You get a better light. Why? Because you're getting a gradient and a wraparound, and I'll show you here in a second. So, if you were taught to do it 45 degrees to the subject, like a portrait or a still life, then go ahead and do it. If you like it, go ahead and do it. I'm not going to try to say there's only one way to do it. It's okay. Do what you like. But I'm going to show you how I do it and why I do it. And so therefore, you know, I think you might learn something. I have shot since the mid 80s. I did 25 years, one light, cross light. All my ad campaigns shot, you know, huge ad campaigns, one light, cross light. And so I did it for 25 years. So I probably shot, I don't know, 10,000 portraits in my day. So if there's one person on the planet that knows Crosslight or Rembrandt, it's me. Look at my pictures. They'll tell the tale. So my point is this. I want to show you why that works and why you want to use Crosslight. And so I'm going to go through and we're going to take an egg. Here's my egg. I pulled it out of the refrigerator. Probably an egg will work pretty good. If you had a round, like a tennis ball, not tennis ball, sorry, a table tennis ball, a white ball, it would probably be a little bit better because you'd see a perfect, like, you know, like the moon, you know, a half crescent, a quarter crescent, whatever, quarter moon, half moon. But all I have is an egg right now. An egg is a beautiful thing to photograph, so we'll use that and that'll be good. So there's a statement I say all the time. The bigger the source to your subject, in relationship to your subject, the softer light. So if I take any source, back it up, it's going to get harsher, more contrasty to my subject. If I bring it in, it's going to get softer. I go through this, oh my gosh, you would not believe how many times I've taught this and how many programs I've taught this. In the One Light Masterclass, I go through it. In my complete Masterclass, I go through hours and hours of teaching lighting. I'm going to go just kind of touch on it a little bit here. So if I have a 2x3 softbox, it's the one that's on the floor right here, which I'm going to use for my still life. And I put that, say, 2 feet to my subjects, or my subject, roughly. And I take a picture. If I back that up, it's going to get harsher. If I move it in, it's going to get softer. I have to adjust for the exposure compensation, but if I take a 3x4, the next size up, and I take and I position that softbox so that it's the same perspective of size from my subject. So if I got to the egg and I looked out, I put this softbox up, the one I have, the small one, and I back the big one up until it fits the same proportion as the small one. Take the small one out, take a picture. Of course, you got to compensate for the exposure. And I take a picture and look at my egg. It's going to look exactly the same quality of light. So, what does that tell you? You can manipulate your light to the point where you can get any look you want. And you can do that by moving your moving your modifier or light source further away or closer, or changing up the size of the modifier. The third thing that happens that changes the quality of light, and it actually basically what it does is it flattens it out, is you take a fill card, or in the case you have a lot of ambient light, you drag the shutter, which means you leave it open longer, and then you allow the ambient light to come in and create a little bit softer look to the subject. So I've done this for years, manipulating your light to get to your subject to get exactly the end result that you want. It's really amazing. It's so much fun. I always say, crack the code to lighting, and then you can do whatever you want. So I haven't actually adjusted the exposure. I just took my modifier off, put my hood on. I put the egg up. I'm going to fire off a shot. Let's see if I can get my exposure right, because let me turn my trigger on. And it may take a second to get, I don't use a flash meter, by the way. So I've got my 90 tilt, or my 90 tilt shift. It's in the macro, it's a macro lens. You could use probably a 7200. I'm just trying to get as close as I can to the egg. So we're gonna lock this camera down so that we can kind of just do a whole bunch of shots here. All right, so first shot, I got my output on my strobe at 5.6 output, which is about half power, I think somewhere around there. So let's fire it off. Oh, I got my ISO way too high. Hold on a second. I was doing a natural light one just to test it when I put the egg down. So we're going to go 100 ISO, f7.1 at 200 a second. That's the highest I can do right now with my sync speed. We'll fire one off. Okay, so let's see here. Let me get my screen. Let's see if I can see that. Magical, it actually looks pretty darn good. Okay, so basically, and I'll show you the JPEG of that. I have the egg basically split down the middle. I have a value of white on one side coming over, and then there's a split in the middle, and I got a value of black on the other side. Now, there is a little bit of ambient coming in from the top a little bit. I've got a piece of black foam core right now to kind of block that, because I want to show you. And the one way you can test how much ambience coming in is you just turn your trigger off, fire one off, and you'll see, and I did that just when I first started here, natural exposure, just to see how much ambient was coming in. There was a little bit. If I was at f22, you probably wouldn't have any. I'm at f7.1. So I can increase my power to get f22. But anyways, the point is I've got a little bit of influence. I don't want any bounce. I don't want the walls, maybe the ceiling's bouncing. I don't know, a little bit. Probably not the ceiling, but that's pretty high up there. But the point is, I don't want to contaminate this first shot with anything other than just the strobe. So, but it tells you that I have a white value coming to a point, and then this is, you can't see my light's about 6 feet away with a bare hood on it. Just the standard hood that comes with your stove, okay? Now, if I was to back that up, say to, let's see, 20 feet, that line between the pure white to the pure black, or the black, would be almost straight as an arrow, or a straight edge. The closer I move my light to my subject, I guess you would say, that transition from pure white to pure black, there's a band in the middle that's making the transition from in the grays area, so it goes pure white all the way through gray to black, to, that little band. That band is a key revelation that tells you how far or how small your light source is to the subject. Now, I don't know exactly, because I could have that softbox 30 feet back. Now, in that case, I don't have enough power, but I could have that box, which is not, it's pretty big, but I could have it back far enough to make a simulated, very, very harsh contrasty scenario. In this case, I don't need to do that. But let me look here again. It's a pretty straight line. I could get it straighter if I wanted. Now, if I take, let's just say I'm going to bring that light source in. This will give you a chance to see the light, because I think it's out of frame here. So let's lower this down, because I'm too high. I can't go too much lower on this light stand, but let's say right there. So now I've brought my light source in, okay? And I got to adjust for my power. So let's go, we want less power, and we're going to go down to, let's go 3.7, just because I'm kind of guessing here, because that's what photography is all about, guesswork, right? Okay, so in theory, that should have a little bit more of a transition than the first shot I did. So that was, I only moved it about 2-3 feet forward, so still about 4 feet from my subject. So let's see, I'm going to step out of frame here. I'm going to see how far I can take that thing back and get it really contrasting. So I'm going to bring this thing way back here. We are about 20 feet, maybe 18 feet. 18 feet from my egg, all right? And so we're going to have to really do a compensation of power here. So let me just go, I'm going to go about 8. That's a long, well, maybe, yeah, 8 output. That's almost full power. I think 9 is full power. Whoa, pretty good. The problem I'm having here, if I had a room that was pure black, I am bouncing. Now this gives me what we would call the negative, or I would say a negative or downside to backing your light up. That is, it spreads everywhere. So right now, that light is hitting the floor, it's hitting the ceiling, it's hitting the back wall, it's hitting everything. And it's causing some, what we'd call contamination. So we're getting I'm getting some light on the top of the egg there from the ceiling and stuff. I would say it's still pretty contrasty shot. Okay, all right, so we got a bare hood. I don't use a bare hood for usually, unless you're using an edge light for a still life. So let's take now, and I'm going to bring my light in like I would to do a scenario. We're going to shoot that egg, and we're going to see how that egg looks and where the shadow comes on that egg and why it is that I position my light in a certain way. So we'll go through that. So I'm going to go and get my strobe and put the softbox on. All right, I moved my camera a little bit here. So what I'm going to do now is let's go to 45 degrees. I'm going to raise this up just a tad here, just a little bit. So we're going to go 45 degrees. So I know I'm blocking a lot of the poor my scene here, but this is kind of what. Again, is what is taught in school. Maybe not. Maybe there's an instructor or two out there that did not teach to do it at 40. Someone says, well, my instructor didn't teach that. So I don't know, but I've been teaching the cross light for probably 25, 30 years. So maybe someone out there heard something that and how I do this. So let me do this. Hold on a second. We've got a lot of power that we got to turn down first. So let's go and go back down to about 5. Let's see if that does it. Okay. All right. So in this scenario, we have a very little bit of a shadow on the one side of the egg. So it's lit beautifully, soft, but it has a little shadow, right? Okay. That may be a scenario that you say, hey, I like that. That's what I want. Good. All right. But I want to build depth, so I need more shadow on the right-hand side of the egg. If we do this, so let's go like this. And I think I could do this without a boom. Usually I have a boom. And in this case, I don't need this here. Okay. We're going to put the light over the top. It's not perfect, but I'll fire one off here. All right. That is what I call, let's put this camera back over here. All right. So that's beautiful light, especially when I do portraits. So if you watch my portrait series, I do a lot of light coming top to bottom. Now the shadow is going to fall underneath the egg a little bit, okay? So the higher you raise the light, the greater the fall off or the shadow underneath. Now, in a portrait series, I always say that you watch the shadow under the nose, the lips, well actually the eyes here, the nose, the lips, the chin. And that's a tell or a revelation of how high your light is and how soft it is. So if it's really sharp, like some of the fashion photographers that go and do really crispy fashion stuff, their light source is very far away. Small light, far away, snappy. So as you bring the light in, it gets softer and softer. A 24-inch beauty dish, for me, at 24 inches over my top of my camera, but to my subject, is gorgeous, beautiful light, right? So if you want top-down light, you can do that. Now, in some cases, you can take a softbox like this and put it directly over the top and have this great wrap of light underneath your, whatever it is, eggs, carrots, whatever it is that you're photographing. So a lot of food photographers do have a top-down, over-the-top scenario. I want to end up with cross light, the Rembrandt, the classical light, the Renaissance kind of feel, okay? That's what I want to end up with. But you can see that scenario I just did is top down. So let's find out, where do we put our softbox to make it look incredible, all right? Well, so let's do this first. We're going to put it right here. Okay, I'm going to start with the softbox a little back further than I would normally do it. I'm going to bring it forward to get my light where I want it. So there's a sweet spot that I like, and there might be a sweet spot that you like. I'm going to tell you where I like it, and then you can say, hey, yeah, I know it works, but there's a sweet spot. And whenever I do a portrait of somebody, I'm always saying every face is shaped a little bit different, and so it's not like you can measure exactly perfectly where that sweet spot is. Sometimes you got to shoot and look and go, And sometimes someone does this, that'll change it, right? In this case, we have an egg that wouldn't, if you spun the egg, nothing would change, but the nose, everything changes. So a lot of times what I do is I go, I have a subject and they do this, right? They're turning just a little bit and I go, oh yeah, perfect, stay that. And then I move my light to get the Rembrandt where I want it. So in this case, we're gonna fire off and the light is a little bit further back. Okay, so let's fire one off here. All right. So in this case, I would say we've got my gray background. My gray background is a little darker than I would want for the scenario of attaching a texture to it, right? That's fine. Okay, I'll show you that in a minute when we do it. When we get to the real still life scenario. But so by moving the gray forward and backwards, I can increase the value. If I say I leave my light where it's at, my subject, which is the egg on that scale, where it's at, I can take that piece of gray and move it forward, and that gray gets a little lighter, back it up, gets a little darker. So there is one way, without a flash meter, to tell if my gray is exactly 50%. And that is, you take your histogram, take the subject out. So you just maybe zoom in on the background, and then fire a frame, and then look at your histogram. If your histogram is spiked perfectly in the middle, that means it's 50% gray. If it's off to the dark side, means you got to add light. If it's on the light, on the highlight side, you need to take away light. So you can just by taking one snap, you can tell where the value of your gray is. And so you want to get it in this scenario where we're going to get out a texture, you want it as close to 50% gray as possible. That's why when I said, I don't have to give you the exact whatever product code on that gray piece of paper, because that's not going to give you, you want to take an exposure, look at the gray to see if it's falling at 50%. Now when you go into Photoshop, you can take your little eyedropper and you can click on gray, and you can find out when your gray is exactly 50%. I think it's 127, 127, 127 in RGB. And then I got exactly 50% gray. If it's a little off, like 124 or whatever, it's not gonna make a big difference. But you wanna get as close to, I think it's 127 on RGB across the board, and then you go, I know I have perfect gray, 50% gray. All right, so let's take a picture. Oh, I did take a picture. And so if I evaluate that, that's not bad. I would say that's not bad, but let's pull it forward a little bit, just a little bit, and we'll fire another one. So what that's going to do is it's going to take and push the shadow over onto the dark side a little bit more. So in some cases, let's say I have what do I have? Let's say a bell pepper, and I have the bell pepper sitting there, and I photograph it, and I go, well, that one side of the bell pepper is looking pretty good, but I'm missing a lot of detail on that front and but I want that one edge of the back to be black. I want to go pure black, or close to pure black. So I just move the light forward, and it'll wrap it around a little bit. I do this with portraits all the time. That's how I feather my Rembrandt triangle, is I move the light either toward the background or toward the camera, or at a 90-degree angle, okay? So, but look at this picture here. This picture is showing a gradient of value from pure white across the gradient to pure black. That line, that I would say that band from where I have pure black to pure white to pure black, that band, that zone is expanded. When I shot at 45 degree in, the band is contracted. So when I shoot 90 degrees, it expands the mid-tone values on your subject. I have done this, and I don't know, again, I've proven it over and over again on portraits, is that when I go 45 degrees to the subject, I get a pretty good shot, but the mid-tone values of grays, or if it's a color, the hues, is more contracted when you have it 45 degrees greater spread when you have it 90. Why is that? Well, that's because this part of the softbox is further from your subject than this part, right? Because your egg's over here, actually. And so you get a gradient value of light coming across your softbox. So this is going to be a lot weaker because it's got further to go. And therefore, you get this gorgeous gradient of tones coming across your subject. So people come to me, or they ask me, or email me, whatever, they say, your portraits have this depth to them and they just look like you can reach in and touch them. Well, that's because I'm getting the greatest value of tones in my photograph as possible. And it's done because I understand how light works, and I've cracked the code to it, and I know how to manipulate it. This is so much fun to be able to go and apply this to a portrait or a still life or a car or whatever. You can light. I can't light a building. Well, you can, I guess, if you paint it. But the fact is that it applies to anything. An egg, which is really small. I could take one of those big pots, or I can take a subject, or I can take a piece of furniture. And when I apply that basic cross light, I get this beautiful values of tones from highlights around to the shadows, which builds depth in my photograph, which is probably the most beautiful classic light on the planet. You got to learn how to do this. So even though we're talking about still life, I hope you're learning something that will apply down the road to portraits, shooting furniture, or shooting cars, or whatever it is. Once you understand lighting, it is so much fun to go and manipulate it to get the way you want it. So that's why I use cross light. That's why I go and have the gradient effect to the egg. Now, someone might ask me, how high do I put my light? Well, okay, in this case, the source is a little bit higher than my magnifier is a little bit higher than the egg. Usually that's what I do. Now, again, it depends on what I'm photographing. So I got what do I have here? I'm going to photograph, I might say, let's say I have a teapot and I shoot it and I go, I just want a little more light on the top of the teapot. I might raise my light up a little bit. And I say, no, I don't want that light on the top. I want it, and so I lower the light. So it depends on the subject. So it's not 100% guarantee you say, you got to raise it exactly this angle, whatever. But I would say this, the 90 degrees gives you the ability to have the sweet spot of the most tones across your subject as possible. I hope this makes sense to you. And I'm going to give you one other little tip, okay? One other little tip that I really went to great lengths to talk about in the One Light Masterclass, and that is the inverse square law. Oh my gosh, don't use that term. We hate that term, right? Inverse square law. Well, I do too, and I hate math. And so what I did though is I plotted out the inverse square law visually with a piece of white foam core, basically, and I shot it in different distances from the light source to subject, whatever. And I discovered something. I kind of knew this in the back of my head because I've been doing this for so long, but let's say I have 3 eggs lined up. Okay, say you're the camera, 3 eggs. And I take my softbox and I shoot it, and let's say I have the softbox pretty close. Let's say it's 1.5 feet out. We know that the first egg is going to get greater value because it's closer to the softbox. The second egg is going to have less value, and then the third egg is going to be a little bit darker, quite a bit darker. So you have 3 values across 3 eggs. They're all the same color white, but because of the light and the inverse square law, the egg furthest from the light source gets less light. Now, I show in the One Light Masterclass how to actually plot out the exact value of that gray. So if you wanted, say, a zone, we can say zone 7 on, that's the old Ansel Adams, zone system, but let's say almost pure white with detail on the first egg. You want, let's say, half that value, and then another lesser value on the third egg. You could plot that out. Now, but let me explain something. This is what I want you to understand. Take away from this. If I back that light up, let's say we know it's going to get harsher, right? Immediately what's going to happen is the value change from the front egg to the back egg is diminished. So as I back my light to source, it doesn't matter what modifier it's on, as I back away, the modifier, it's going to get harsher, yes, but the value on the third egg is going to get lighter between the 3, meaning that it's not as great of a fall off. Now, if I take a bigger modifier, so let's say I go and do and I explain this in my master class, the complete master class, like for hours. I go through and I explain how to set a bigger modifier up in relationship to the smaller one. I just explained that earlier. But let's say I get the same quality light on a bigger modifier, but it's further away. Okay, so the quality of light's exactly what I had before on a modifier closer, but now it's further away with a bigger modifier. What happens automatically is now you get a less value change between the three eggs. If I back it up and get a big one, like I have a 4 by 5 foot or 4 by 6 foot, 4 by 6, and I go and I take my calculation and I put that back, say it's 10 feet away. Now, almost all three eggs are going to be equally in value. You might have a slight difference in value on the third egg, the furthest from the light source, but very little value change. That's the inverse square law. So you can apply that. So let's say I have a group shot, and I'm going to photograph, let's say CEO, top management. There's 6 people, and I want to do cross light. Well, I know that if I get a really big source, put it really far away, which in that case I'd put 2. I take 2 big, either 7-foot octos or 4 by 6 foot softboxes, back them up, and that light source coming to my subject is going to be equally distributed compared to if I had that source really close to the subject. So the person on the far left would always get more light than the person on the far right. I hope this makes sense. If you can see it, and here's what I would do to you, or tell you to do, because I'm right now instructing and talking to you, right? And so you go, okay, thanks, Joel. But until you go and maybe actually set up a scenario and then test it, take a white egg and test it. Put 3 eggs in a row, test it out for yourself, and you'll see it. And then in your brain you go, oh my gosh, now I know that when I have a scenario and I need to throw light evenly across something, I can back it up. But if I back it up, it gets harsher, but if I get a bigger modifier, it softens it again. So that's cracking the code of lighting. And from there, let's go and do something really fun by shooting a actual still life portrait, or still life. I say portrait, that's all I do is portraits. You know me because of my portraits. Still life scenario. Let's have fun.